Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another HSR analysis. Today we're looking at Mr. Luocha, Luocha, Lauka. I'm not exactly sure how to say it, but we're looking at Mr., as I will call him, Luocha, the man, the myth, the legend, the Otto ApocalypseI lookalike. He's an imaginary abundance character, and this is the first time an imaginary character is appearing, essentially meaning that there is only a 5-star imaginary characters so far, which is kind of tricky because imaginary, you kind of want that stuff. Imaginary tends to be very powerful, and I'll explain in just a second, because also this is our first time looking at imaginary character. We have to look at what imaginary means. First of all, Abundance is a healer, so that means Luocha is a healer character, but he's a bit of a hybrid healer slash DPS, but I'll get into that once we get into his kit. As for what does imaginary mean, well, as we explained with Quantum, there's a specific mechanic with Quantum. Imaginary has a specific mechanic as well, but this is to do with the weakness breaking of an enemy. And it's something that you have to note down when going into a situation, and is knowing what the actual weakness break does. So, imaginary weakness break applies the imprisonment effect, which then pushes the enemy back in the turn order and reduces the enemy's speed. This is by the way, very, very good thing to have, and essentially having an imaginary character is going to be a crucial part in fighting imaginary enemies. Pushing them back in the turn order and reducing their speed, essentially inflicting the slowness debuff, is going to be a crucial part of doing this. So, there's no dot, unfortunately, with imaginary, so you won't be able to, actually, combo this with a dot character or something along those lines, but you're going to be able to kind of at least, give yourself the massive advantage if you play a speed build, and then you reduce the enemy speed. You're going to be going, essentially, you're going to have 2 turns before the enemy can have 1, if you play your cards correctly. But yeah, that is something that to note down, is that imaginary does work completely differently from all the other ones. There's no dot, and it's a turn order pushback as well as a speed reduction. With that little clarification out of the way, let's get into Luocha's kit, starting off with his skill. After using his skill, he immediately restores a single ally's HP equal to a specific percentage, depending on what level you are, of Luocha's attack plus X amount of number. So, note that down. He's not a HP scaling healer like all the other ones that we've looked at so far. He is a attack-based healer. He heals based on his attack percentage. There's not many characters like this in games, but he is one of them, and he's going to be just fine with that. Don't look at this in kind of like a different light. This is not going to mean anything substantially different. So yeah, it's just absolutely fine, because the percentages are generally higher for attack scalers. Meanwhile, Luocha gains a stack of Abyss Flower. Abyss Flower will be explained in a short while in the skill. When an ally's HP drops below 50%, Luocha will immediately use his skill one time on this ally without consuming a skill point. This effect can be triggered again when the conditions are met after Luocha takes action 2 more times. There you go. He has a little bit of a, if I can call it, a safety mechanism with his team. So essentially, once every 3 turns, he can use his skill for free without you having to use his turn on an ally that drops below 50%. Now, that is the trigger requirement. They have to drop below 50%. It's not be at, let's say, 40% and then drop to 30. It's drop below 50. So from above 50 to below 50 is the requirement for this to trigger. So really good. It's a nice safety mechanism, and you can just get a free cast of your skill with this in mind. Which is a very, very good, by the way, skill, by the way. This is going to probably keep him, very powerful for a fair while, as it's essentially a free cast. Going on to his ultimate, though. Dispel 1 enemy buff and deal imaginary damage equal to a certain percentage of Luocha's attack to all enemies. For every enemy buff dispelled, Luocha gains 1 stack of Abyss Flower. Again, Abyss Flower will be explained in the next thing with the talent. But it's quite a good ultimate. It deals damage, and this is what I meant by he'll be a healer damage hybrid, is because one of his things heals, one of his things attacks, and you have a hybrid character. And one will be actually really good, as dispelling enemy buffs is extremely important. Specifically when you get into the high end of content, getting specific buffs of enemies is very, very crucial. But now going on to explaining what Abyss Flower and the stacks of Abyss Flower do, which is the Cycle of Life, which is his talent, by the way. When Abyss Flower is stacked 3 times, Luocha consumes all stacks to deploy a field against the enemy. When an enemy is in the field, is attacked by an ally, the ally immediately restores HP equal to a certain percentage of Luocha's attack, right? It's based on attack again, and then also plus an extra amount, which is mostly irrelevant some of the times, but that's that. And the field effect lasts 2 turns. Essentially, at 3 stacks of Abyss Flower, which you get through, obviously, your skill and your burst, At 3 stacks, you place down a field with Luocha automatically, and then the enemy, essentially, when they are attacked by a specific ally, so if you attack them with Luocha, Luocha then will heal for this specific amount of his attack, plus this amount, and this field lasts for 2 turns. Really good, actually, to be quite frank with you. A really nice way to have cyclical healing, and overall a positive to the whole kind of like, to his character. It's like a nice little passive healing that you get maybe when you don't have skill points, when you don't have energy, and you'll have just like a nice little passive heal on the side. So really good. And then his technique, I don't even want to read it because it's useless, but you essentially heal an ally upon entering combat. It's not overly useful, and you probably will never use this one. So far, the Luocha, by the way, is very good. I wouldn't say overpowered, but he's a solid character. Like, he's like very solid, like very powerful in my opinion as a healer. Will he be the best healer in the game? I have reasons that I'll get to when we get to that section to believe that he won't be, but he'll be at least a second strongest, or at least a close contender for first. But moving on to his traces. First trace, Luocha's skill removes 1 debuff from the target ally. So instead of the skill just doing what the skill does, it now also has a dispel effect, which is really good. You can now dispel multiple things across multiple turns very easily. One thing to note, though, that this dispel does not count towards getting your stack of Abyss Flower. Right? You will not get an extra Abyss Flower stack from your skill just because you dispelled something because it says in the burst. They are 2 separate things. It's essentially like you've just written at the end here, can also dispel debuffs, right? That's all that's happened. So there's no extra Abyss Flower stack gain from this. Trace 2, after using his ultimate, Luocha additionally regenerates 10 energy, or essentially could have written down reduce his ultimate cost by 10 energy. It's the same thing. It has the same effect pretty much. But yeah, you just restore 10 energy. That's fine. And then Trace 3, damage received by Luocha from a single attack cannot be higher than 80% of his max HP. Essentially, he cannot be one-shot if he's at full HP. It's a nice little safety mechanism for a character. I'm not sure if he'll be powerful, or if this will be useful, because I don't know how powerful certain enemies are and how strong their single hit attacks are. But your Luocha cannot be one-shot from 100% of his max HP, or even 81% of his max HP, to be quite frank with you. So really good so far. The character so far is a solid unit. He's not overpowered in my honest opinion. There's reasons for that. I don't think anything here sounds too crazy. He has decent healing. He has dispelling. He has passive healing. He has a heal again in a technique, which you're not going to use. And then he has a bit of like defensives here through this stuff and a bit of utility. Overall, a solid character, and if you get him, you're going to be well off. Also, he's imaginary. Not a crazy amount of imaginary characters in the game. So that's going to be like one of the bonuses to have with him, is that he's imaginary. And that's always a bonus. If we're going to compare it to Honkai Impact, having imaginary characters is always a bonus. Having them in this game is always going to be a bonus. Same thing with Quantum. But yeah, a character is obviously enhanced through the Eidolons. Let's take a look at those, though. Starting off with Eidolon 1. When using a skill, if the ally's HP is lower than 50% of their max HP, Luocha's outgoing healing increases by 30%. If the target ally's HP is 50% of their max HP or higher, Luocha creates a shield for them that can withstand damage equal to 15% of their max HP for 1 turn. It's a really good fucking Eidolon, by the way. Like, unironically, really unironically, a really good Eidolon 1, and this is probably going to be his like core Eidolon that you're going to want to get for him if you are running him as a character. Essentially, if the ally that you are healing with your skill is below 50%, you heal them and you have increased healing output. If they're above 50% HP, you put a shield on them for 15% of their max HP. Really good Eidolon 1, by the way. And probably, out of all the characters that we've looked at so far, the strongest Eidolon 1 that we've looked at, comparatively. If we're going to gauge characters by the Eidolon 1, Luocha has the strongest one, guaranteed. Or rather, bang for your buck, right? Like, what are you getting in return for the investment? Really good. Eidolon 2, though, after using his skill, if the ally's HP is fully restored, Luocha additionally regenerates 10 energy. A bit of a tricky one to pull off constantly, but essentially, if your skill takes your ally from whatever HP they're at and puts them at 100%, you will regenerate energy. It's kind of like a little bit of a tricky one, but you can abuse this if you are very attentive and you kind of pay attention to exactly knowing to utilize this Eidolon all the time. If you can do that, and if you're very attentive to ally HP, and you know how much you heal per hit, and you can kind of like fiddle around with it, this Eidolon is also very high value, as it's more energy restoration, right? It's an extra 10 on top of whatever the skill already gives you. So, very good so far. Very, very good Eidolons. Luocha, by the way, right now, probably the most bang for your buck Eidolon character in the game. Some characters like fall off at Eidolon 1 or 2. This is 10 out of 10 so far the whole time. But I digress. Skill +2, attack +1 on the Eidolon 3, and then Eidolon 4. When Luocha's field is active, or from his talent, when that field is active, enemies become weakened and deal 10% reduced damage. Really good again. It's a 10% damage reduction to the enemies. They deal 10% less, which is great. And his field is active. You know, it's going to be hard to have like 100% uptime on the shield. I will admit that. It's going to be hard to have 100% uptime. But if you are taking Luocha into a potentially an ideal situation where there's going to be a lot of dot application, a lot of dispelling, needing a lot of enemies buffing themselves, or just where you can, like, you know, heal enemies a lot, or rather heal your allies a lot, you'll have a good time, right? That's I don't want to say any more than that, because that's essentially what it is, right? If you can actually use him to do the parts that give him the Abyss Flower, you can have a permanent 10% damage reduction, damage dealt reduction on the enemies, which is very powerful, but it's, again, a bit finicky to play around with, so bear that in mind. Eidolon 5, Ultimate 2, Talent +2, Standard. Eidolon 6, Dust to Dust, when using Luocha's ultimate, deals additional imaginary damage equal to 100% of his attack to enemy targets with buffs. It's not that great, to be quite frank. The Eidolon 6s aren't that great in this game. It's kind of weird. It's an okay one. It does a bit more damage if the enemy has a debuff, and that's kind of the situation that you want to be using his Eidolon in, is if the enemies are buffed, so you can dispel that buff and get a stack of Abyss Flower. So in an ideal situation, his E6 is very good. Very, very good. More damage means more damage, more weakness breaking, more everything, more stack of Abyss Flower. But again, that is it's very hard to recommend going that way, because it's not that high value. It's only 100. You essentially deal, it's like a regular attack. You've essentially just done a normal attack because of the wording. Imaginary damage equal to his attack. It's not imaginary damage, you know, based on something else or whatever. It's like you've just hit all the enemies with your basic attack again, right? All the ones that have a debuff, or rather a buff. So it's really hard to recommend going that far because of its lack thereof power, as well as its very finicky situation. So, see, E6 is not that great. Where the power for this character lies is in E1 and E2, and specifically his E1. If you get this character at E1, you're going to have a very powerful character, and even then, without any Eidolons either, you're having a very powerful character. He's not going to be overpowered, and I don't think he deserves any nerfs at all. I think he's a very solid unit. He would probably be classified under the umbrella of, if you get him, because I eventually will do a tier list, and I've been thinking about how to compile it, he falls under the umbrella of, this is a powerful motherfucker. He'll probably fit into the kind of like the gene section of, if I was to compare it to Genshin Impact, the gene section, like a really solid unit no matter what time period of the game. Just an overall banging unit, right? But yeah, that's where he falls right now, but more information about the tier list once we finish all these characters. Now to get onto the reason why I don't think he's overpowered, and the reason he could become overpowered in the future if they eventually do it. The light cones. He currently does not have a signature light cone. These are the Abundance 5 stars, and only Bailu has one. There are no signature light cones for Luocha. And that, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to be overpowered, but it means that there's no specific playstyle built for him to make him overpowered. So it's going to be a bit tough to recommend him, essentially, or rather say that he's going to be overpowered, because, well, it's hard, because whilst Bailu's one, it can be great, increases the max HP, that's a detriment, by the way. Because, obviously, Luocha isn't a HP scaler. So let's just go through all the Eidolons that we kind of look at, essentially, is Bailu's. Increase the wearer's max HP by a certain percentage and outgoing healing by a certain percentage. So you only gain with Luocha the value of the outgoing healing. There is no HP required from this character or for this character, because he's an attack scaler in everything that he does. So you're only gaining value there. And then the last part is just the damage outgoing, right? So when the healer, when the wearer heals allies, the recorded amount of healing, and then they launch an attack that deals a certain amount of percentage of that healing that you recorded. So you're gaining very minimal things from Bailu's light cone for Luocha, so it's really hard to even recommend this one. Unless the base stats of it are that much higher and that much better for Luocha, then that's the only reason I'd ever recommend this one. But as I don't know the base stats as of right now, it's hard to recommend this one because you only get 12% outgoing healing. But when you look at all the 4 stars, you can get a lot better things, right? So, for example, post-op conversation, increase the energy regeneration rate of the wearer, so more ultimate, increase the outgoing healer when they use outgoing healing, when they use ultimate by a certain percentage. So when you use your ultimate, your healing goes up. So it potentially, this one is already kind of better, not exactly because it's a little bit more finicky to play around with because it's based on your ultimate. So hard to recommend that one as well, but again, more things already from it. Shared feeling, increase the wearer's outgoing healing by a certain percentage, and when using their skill, regenerate a certain amount of energy for all allies. This one's immediately a lot better because you have a lot more utility. You have practically equal percentage of outgoing healing to Bailu's. You have 12% on base Bailu, you have 10% on base shared feeling, so it's practically equal. But on top of this one, you get energy regeneration for all your allies, which is, by the way, very good utility when compared to something like extra damage, right? Like, I doubt that we're ever going to be in a damage deficit in the game. Damage is going to be very abundant, in my opinion. And as for the last option, Warm Nights Won't Last. Increase the wearer's max HP. It's already disqualified, so we're not even going to look at that one. So, really, Luocha is in a really tough position right now to call him overpowered, or even, like, in regards to a light cone, super strong, because there's very little options for him. At a certain point, you may even want to go for a 3-star cornucopia. When the wearer uses their skill or ultimate, their outgoing healing is increased, and it's a baseline 12%, which, by the way, is the same as Bailu's. So you could run cornucopia and Bailu's, and it would be practically the same value, barring the base stats of the light cones, right? You're just looking at the affixes because, yeah, it's practically the same. But yeah, your best option, in my opinion, is going to be something like Shared Feeling because, well, it's a nice supportive one. I hope he does get one in the future. I hope he does get a light cone in the future because I think he could really thrive from one and probably become overpowered with it. But yeah, that's where he falls in right now. Now onto the last section, the relic sets and planetary ornaments. Now it's kind of like this is like such a subjective section. I've kind of started to realize it's run whatever the hell you want, but because we know that he scales with attack percentage, there's a few ones that would be better recommendations over others. Now, you can easily run the full imaginary set, the Wastelander of Banditry Desert, which is 10% imaginary, and when attacking debuffed enemies, the wearer's crit rate is increased by 10. If the enemy is imprisoned, the wearer's crit damage increases by 20. 100% fine to run that one. It would make Luocha a bit more of a damage dealer, and that's fine. But if you want to make him a bit more of a healer, you would run 2-set imaginary just for a bit of damage, but then you would also run 2-set attack over here on Musketeer of the Wild Wheat, just increasing his overall healing output. That would 100% be very effective. If you want to make him a pure healer, well, then you'd obviously go for 2-set Musketeer of the Wild Wheat and 2-set Passerby of Wandering Cloud. But I don't think in many games do you want a pure healer. You sometimes do want essentially a 90% healer, 10% damage, or maybe 80% healer, 20% damage. It's a lot more utility based. That's the reason why Jean in Genshin Impact is very powerful, as well, she deals a lot of damage and heals a fairly bit. So that's that. That's with the relic sets. As for the planetary ornaments, it's kind of obvious in my opinion. There's a few options that you could go for, but my overall recommendation is going to be Space Sealing Station. I don't think anything really comes close to competing. He's a healer first and foremost, and I doubt that he'll be able to do break affecting or weakness breaking that great. So, kind of don't consider Talia Kingdom of Banditry because I don't think he'll be that good at it. But, if you really need it, go for it. But overall, I think Space Sealing Station will be your overall best. It's a speed required, 24% attack increase, so healing increase, damage increase, all increases. So I think Space Sealing Station is going to be his best planetary. So a quick summary of that. For healing output, 2-set Passerby of Wandering Cloud and 2-set Musketeer of the Wild Wheat for healing output. If you're looking for pure damage, go for Wastelander of Banditry Desert. And then for the planetary ornament, just go Space Sealing Station. It's going to give you the most bang for your buck, in my honest opinion. And that is Luocha. A bit unfortunate that he does not have a light cone, and I really hope he does get one in the near future. Maybe on the launch of the game, which apparently is somewhere around April, but no confirmations about that yet. I really like the design of the character. I think he's a really cool character. He looks great, and he's also based on a previous character, Otto ApocalypseI. He's kind of like the same theme, same vibe, and he looks great. And I like the character. So, good. Also imaginary, by the way. Imaginary is a massive bonus. If you get imaginary characters in the game, I believe there's 2. You're very lucky. And that's that. Hope you guys enjoyed Luocha's little analysis. And if you did, like and subscribe to the channel. Have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.